welcome everybody, and thank you so much for being here today. And we're very excited. I'm very excited to have Jenny Cockell as our guest to be interviewed. I should say this is for those of you who are joining us for the first time. This is the Caritas Consciousness Project, and we are a nonprofit devoted to programs that promote the evolution of consciousness. And that is a huge field that encompasses many different topics. And so we're kind of eclectic in that sense, but we have a lot of fun exploring spiritual topics, paranormal topics, science and spirituality, psycho-spiritual topics, all of the above, dream work, all kinds of things. So if you enjoy our programs, I hope you will go to our website, explore our website, see some of our videos that we record all of these events, and you can view videos that or events that you've missed on our videos recording page. So check it out. And so today we have with us Jenny Cockell, and thank you so much for making time for this interview, Jenny.
That's right, and thank you for asking me anyway.
Very excited about this. The movie that they made, Yesterday's Children, based on your book with Jane Seymour. I think it's a wonderful movie. I know it does differ in some minor ways, but I think it was well done myself, and I show it to my students in the Spiritism 101 class every year. So, and we've been seeing it for many years.
Yeah, I didn't actually, I didn't worry that it had changed quite a lot, because what it did do was bring the idea to more people, to a much broader audience.
Exactly.
Which is, they wanted to make a film that people would want to watch, so they changed a bit, but at least they got some of the core stuff right.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they did. And you know, I personally see your life, partly anyway, as a mission, and your memories as in service to that mission, to show people that these things are possible because they've been verified in your case. Yeah. And the movie certainly helped to get that.
I think also, I mean, I do a lot of the reason I shared the, I mean, I'm fairly a quiet person, a quite private person, but one of the main reasons I shared it was when I was growing up, it wasn't a subject that was talked about. There wasn't any kind of support. So partly I wanted to share the whole story so that other people would feel a little bit more comfortable with their own journey, with their own understanding. Yes. So you're quite right in that respect. It was something that was a mission, that something I needed to do, and I felt strongly about it and pushed myself out of my comfort zone to do it because I thought it was important.
Yes, I think that is extremely important as it was for you to engage those memories and you know, the urgency that you felt, because to reconnect with the children that you had to leave so prematurely.
And heal the past and understand, and eventually to be able to let go and move on. I think there are a lot of children who have memories. Some, they're only tiny fragments. Sometimes a child will just say one sentence and then forget and move on. But to be able to move on and live in the here and now, I think that's what you're supposed to do. I think remembering is actually the oddity. I don't think it's intended. You are supposed to.
It's remembering in detail that is such an oddity too. I mean, many children who do, and whose, you know, memories have been investigated by people like Jim Tucker and Carol Bowman, both of whom we have spoken to. But, you know, when you say some children just have one line, you know, one sentence, my
Yeah.
daughter did that when she was about 2.5.
Right.
Driving
I
the
think
car.
that's probably fairly normal. I think a
Yes.
lot of children will do just say one thing. And more, I'm inclined to think that almost every child has some kind of memory, but very, very fleeting. Just
Yeah.
a tiny little thing that goes past. But
And-
if you like, I could detail exactly what some of the memory was, because
Sure.
I recently gone through, because I had the list of verifications that's put together by Gitty Coates for the BBC. And it matched up what I remembered with what Sonny, the oldest member of the Sutton family, remembered. And it was the map. When I was a child, I was drawing a map of Malaheid. So there were two things. I remembered the death, and I remembered the village of Malaheid. So in my mind, I can still walk through the village. I know where the jetty is. And I remember waiting on the jetty with a shawl wrapped around me, and it was quite cold. I didn't have layers and layers of clothes, just the shawl to keep me warm. And I remember walking back home, turning up the lane. And then as I went up the lane, it was the first house on the left. And there was a wall. You had to go past the wall. On the other side of the road, there was a boggy meadow. And you went through a farm-sized gate and then back on yourself towards the cottage, and the cottage was a buff-coloured stone. I didn't know quite how many windows. There were only a couple of windows at the front. I wasn't sure if there was one at the back at all. The cottage itself, there was a dip. I could see just above the door. There was a dip in the roof, and the roof wasn't thatched. I wasn't sure what it was, but it wasn't thatched. As you went in through the door, there was a partition, panelled wooden partition, and you couldn't go straight ahead. You had to kind of go left or right. The room on my left-hand side was the kitchen. The range was against the middle wall. It was front to back of the cottage. There were only the two rooms. There was a table in the middle. The other room I didn't remember very much, but it had some sort of partitions. And apparently in the notes, Sonny had drawn a little sketch that corroborated what I'd said, but I didn't ever see the sketch. So I remember the area, I remember the building, that next to the cottage there was a stone wall, and I could only remember that it was the right height to lean on, but you couldn't. And Sonny is saying the reason that you couldn't lean on it was it had sharp stones on edge all the way along the top. So you get part of it and miss part of it. I knew that there wasn't a garden at the front, and I thought perhaps there were sheep. There wasn't a garden at the front, says Sonny, but there were cattle there, not sheep. So I didn't get that quite right. It's bits and bits. At the back, there was a small garden that was just used. You couldn't get round the back. And Sonny said it was fenced. That's why you couldn't get round the back. And there were vegetables grown there. I remembered myself as Mary. I remembered having dark hair tied in a bun. I remembered the white blouse, not white, it was off-white, pale colour blouse, and it finished just below the elbow in 3/4 length sleeves, with a cuff with no button. I remembered it was dark clothes for working in. Now, Sonny didn't remember the pale blouse, the one that was worn that was on a Sunday, but he did remember the dark clothes, and the shawl. I remembered. He remembered that as well. It was his sister who remembered the pale blouse. Then I remembered the husband. He was dark-haired. He was quite an impressive man. Sonny said he was quite fit. And I had him working up high with wood. And I just couldn't picture in my mind, it's kind of like wood roof trusses or something. It turned out he was a scaffolder. I said, very skilled job. Sonny said he was a scaffolder, worked with huge timbers, which were bound together to make the scaffold, because it was a long time ago. Very skilled job, word for word, the same thing. I said that that Mary's husband was, he wasn't from the same village, that he came from somewhere else, and he had been in the army. We found the paperwork eventually, his signing up papers saying where he was from, and he was from the area that almost into the next county that Sonny had said he was from, County Kildare. Then I remember the death. I remembered it wasn't a home, because there was electric lighting. It was very bright, because the cottage at home was dull, dark, dismal. It had the study was saying it had only little gas lights, so it didn't have bright light, no electricity. And I remembered as I was in the bed, I could see just one window. And I think it was ABC, an American TV company, got me to do a sketch, and they took it to the hospital, and the matron said, I know where that is. And I ended up being taken back there. And the first thing I saw when I got in there were two windows. And I thought, that's not quite right. But I moved round to where the bed was, and there was a pier sticking out between the windows. And when I got to where the bed was, I could only see the one window, and I could still see the tree outside. That's why I knew it was one floor up. So I still see the tree out of the window. There were a couple of things that I remembered. There were two things they put in the film which were quite important, because there was I remember having damp hands, and one of the children came rushing into the cottage. I had to dry my hands. I had to go out after them because they wanted me to look at something, and they caught, I thought it was a rabbit, it was actually a hare, somebody told me, caught in a snare. And I do remember that there's a chap down the road who'd show them how to make this snare. And all the heads were crowded round, and I just sort of peeked in the middle over the top. And that was one of the things that when I met Sonny eventually, he just was flabbergasted at how did I know? Nobody had ever, they hadn't said anything to anybody. The other one they got in the film was the stuffing the mattress, which was actually quite funny because it was a lovely day and there was chaff going everywhere, it was blowing up in the wind, but we were stuffing the mattress and I sewed it up. And then we went to get it in through the door and it wouldn't go through the door. And rather than not getting upset, we just all fell about laughing. It was absolutely silly, but in laughter. And I didn't remember. Sonny finished the story off. He said, "Oh yeah, I remember." And my mother had to unstitch it and take some out, and then stitch it up again. So often I would give part of the story, and he'd give the other part. So a lot of the other. I was trying to think if there have been tiny little bits, but when you think that it's an entire lifetime. It's actually, although it's quite a lot of memory, it's not a lot of memory. There are so many gaps, but luckily, I mean, really luckily for me, I mean, I thought you'd have to remember the names, and all I remember was the name Mary. And I had really quite a job trying to find what the other names were, and never did quite get there. But I had the location. I didn't need the name. I knew exactly where. I knew it was Malaheid. I'd known it was Malaheid since I was a child. And I looked at Ireland on a map and found that little dot. But it's there. I know it's there. Why do I know it's there? I just know it's there, and never ever looked at anywhere else. So. And
you had never been to Ireland.
Sorry.
You had never been to Ireland.
No, no. Well, we weren't in the position when I grew up. We were not in the position to have holidays abroad. We didn't even have holidays very often anyway. And then my parents separated and we were effectively homeless. One of my mother's friends took us in, and it took quite a while before we eventually found somewhere proper to live. And it was really quite hand to mouth really for quite a while. And I didn't ever have holidays abroad. I didn't go anywhere. It was only later on when I eventually managed to get up the courage to think, well, I've got to do something about this, that I had 2 nights in a bed and breakfast in Malaheid. And that was very, very strange because I knew where I was. I knew where I was walking. I knew where to go to find things. And I thought, this is fine. It's good. But of course, tracing the family took a little bit longer because they weren't there anymore. But yeah, that was very strange. There's a lot of children, if you watch children who have past life memories, if you've ever seen any footage of the time that the child goes back and they actually see the place they've been before, it's a really weird experience. This is one of the things that doesn't always come across with research that you see. It is a very strange experience. You suddenly have this, because you've had all these memories in your mind and they're fixed in time. They're often later in the life, surrounding the last year or so before the death. Quite commonly, there are just a lot of the children who remember past lives. It's that bit that you tend to remember. And when you get to the place, that's been held in your mind in stasis almost. And then you get there and it all floods back, and you suddenly, part of you, you know all the time that the time has passed and you are who you are now. But some part of you hasn't accepted it, which is why you remember. And you will stand there and suddenly that part of you has to accept that time has moved on. You are not that person anymore. And you've got to let go. And it's really quite disturbing, just for a few moments.
Yes.
Oh, I'm not that person anymore. I'm me now. And but you can see it in children's faces. I've seen it a few documentaries where the child gets there and their face drops and you think, it's just dawned on them. You can't go back.
Right.
It's
but in a way you did go back, in a sense.
Oh, that's it. Well, that's it. You do. You pick it up and you keep going.
Yeah.
And you don't let go.
Your memories of Mary Sutton's life began when you were about 3?
They didn't begin, actually. They were always there. It's just by the time I got to 3, I couldn't work out why other people weren't talking about past lives. I thought perhaps you weren't supposed to. Perhaps it was considered an impolite topic. But I suppose it's actually when I went to Sunday school church and I realised they weren't talking about past lives. And then I broached my mother about it. So I was 3, probably nearly 4, when I started to talk about it. But it had always been there, and it came as quite a shock when I realised that other people. I've been told that other people didn't remember, and I thought, but how could you forget?
Yeah.
How could you forget something like that?
Right. How open were your parents when you started to reveal these memories as a child?
Sorry, how
open were your parents?
Well, my father. I didn't really talk a great deal to my father. We had quite a difficult time with him when we were young. My mother was very matter of fact, and she just said, well, it's a belief, and kind of left it that. And I got the feeling that, I did talk about it some more, but I got the feeling that it wasn't really something to talk about. Mind you, I don't think that's ever stopped me. I sometimes don't know boundaries, so I just keep talking
anyway. What do you think caused you? Most children who remember previous lives, by the time they're 7 or 8 years old, the memories are gone. What do you think made the difference in your life? They continued to remember them.
Yeah, I wonder. Some of it, I wonder. I'm on the autistic spectrum. I didn't find out until a few years ago. And one of the things that happens for children on the spectrum is that you internalize. So it takes you a long time to learn how to negotiate social situations. So I think when other children were learning to play with each other and play games, I was slightly bemused and didn't really know quite how to play games. And so I just stuck with thinking about my memories and hung on to those instead. So I wonder if it could be that. And I've been talking with some of the, especially some of the researchers, and they're beginning to realize that they thought there was no difference between children who remember and who are on the spectrum or not. But they're now beginning to wonder if there actually is a slight increase. The other thing is, of course, the way your memory works is slightly different. So there's a slightly obsessive photographic type memory. So children who remember will tend to have a better memory anyway. All round, they will have a better memory. So I think some of it will be down to personality, some down to the way the structure, literally the structure of the brain, that sort of. So, okay. The short answer is I don't know, but let's. Well, there are possibilities.
And this is just a theory, but it struck me in thinking about that a lot of children who remember previous lives died what we would call prematurely, either through violence or, but in your case, it was also the urgency, the guilt at having left your children when they were so young, and with a father who was not
caring.
very reliable.
There are consistent factors with children who remember past lives, and the sudden early death and unfinished business are quite high on the list. Often, yeah, they are.
Reincarnation too, a quick reincarnation. Right?
Possibly. I mean, I remember 3 lives in a row that had sudden deaths. The one before Mary, which is in Japan, I haven't been able to verify the person, but the family did agree that I got the house and the location of the house, and there were lots of other details that fitted. Then there was Mary, because that one that was sort of drowned at the age of 17. Then there was Mary, and it was the dying in childbirth and leaving the children, which was horrible. You know, it was, my dreams when I was a child were all about the children and what was going to happen to children.
Yeah.
But then I also remembered, not quite, as I'll actually go through the detail. I remembered a life in between Mary and Jenny, but as a small child in a road accident. And when I was quite young, I used to have horrible dreams that there was a truck chasing me on the pavement. And when I had to go to school on my own and walk to school on my own, I was always looking over my shoulder because I thought there's a truck after me, it's going to get me. And through most of my life, I used to wake up, not all the time, just from time to time, glancing down at my legs and thinking they'd been crushed. My legs have been crushed, and just looking up and then thinking, oh, well, that's a bit odd. So it's piecing that one together. But I actually managed to find the person and the location and got that one verified as well. But far fewer memories, but just enough. I didn't have the location, but I ended up with the first name and the initial. And I knew it was during the war years. So I looked, my mother helped me. We looked at the records office and went through loads and loads of records. And for about the age of 6, about 1945, Charles S something. But I had to look at 3 or 4 years either side, just in case I got it wrong. Because if there were 3 or 4 of them, then it would be very difficult. But there was only one. For about a 6-7 year span, there was only one in the whole country. And when I went there and I found the house, and I thought, that's the house I've been dreaming about. And when I found the brother, I said, what was it that was on the left hand side? And it was an Anderson shelter, which was a sort of bomb shelter during the war. And I thought, well, that's gone. And all the different details. And we walked down and I said, well, the school used to be here. What was opposite the school? There was something really interesting. Oh, you know, all that would be the cake shop. That was what was there. So there was the detail, but not as much. Yes. And it's quite normal. Children who remember several past lives, one is dominant, the one that matters the most. But you're right, all 3 of them, it was an early death and sudden and unexpected and unfinished business.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the biggest unfinished business was Mary Sutton.
The children, exactly, which is why that was the biggest memory.
Yeah, even though there was a life in between.
Yes.
And your present one, the Mary one stands out more. Of course,
exactly.
Girl doesn't have all that much to remember compared to an adult with 8 children, right?
But it was the responsibility of a child. It's let go, move on. Right. With a mother, you have the responsibility for the children, and particularly since the father was incapable of looking after them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember Mary's death?
Yes.
Do you remember? I know you remember the hospital room.
Yeah. No, I remember the death in detail. I remember. I had trouble breathing. I remember it was, you know, the chest pains and fever and feeling a bit confused. And then suddenly, I do remember being above the body, but it wasn't directly above. And you know, sometimes you see these things in films where people drift out. It wasn't like that. It was bang, straight out. It was sudden, and it was off to one side, and it seemed to be slightly higher than the ceiling, which was really peculiar. And then looking down, and then I saw the door open, and then a nurse walked in, looked, and rushed out again. And then a little while later, someone came in. I realized it was a priest, and he came down and he knelt. And then I seemed to fold up and disappear backwards. I went backwards, and there were I could see some lights around me, but I was still looking. My concentration was still down there. A lot of people, they look ahead go towards the light. It wasn't that. I didn't want to go. But if people who have near-death experiences then say about arriving at the place of light and meeting, I don't remember that bit. I do remember being somewhere surrounded by other energies. I felt that I got smaller somehow. I found one other, Shanti Devi, one of the earliest ones. She said exactly the same. She felt that she'd got much smaller. But I felt like an energy, and I was surrounded by lots of these other energies. But the key features were there was no real sense of time passing. It was constantly light, but I think we were creating some of the light. But it was, you know, the feeling when you're holding a child, a newborn in your arms, how you feel. Imagine that feeling with every other energy all around you and feeling connected to every other energy, every other person there. And it's absolutely amazing feeling. And that sense of calm, and nothing mattered because you were connected and you were part of this system. Strangely, there are experiences called mystical experiences, or I think, yes, mystical experiences, or enlightenment, or at one with everything.
Yes.
When I was about 14, I used to babysit, 14, 15 probably, babysit for a family during the day because their mum was at work. And I was walking back on tea time, back home again, and the light was fairly low and it was flashing slightly through the trees as I was walking. So it was slightly sort of hypnotic. And just for a moment, I felt the energy of the trees. Then I felt as though I was out of my body and I was within the energy of the trees. And then suddenly I felt as though I was within the energy of absolutely everything. And it was the same feeling. Just for a moment. And nothing mattered. It was just so peaceful. And it all came back in. And I realized I was still standing up and it had happened within one stride. Most peculiar. I didn't talk about it for years and years. And I found there was an Australian research group online, and they'd studied these mystical experiences, sometimes they're very religious experiences, and catalogued them. And I thought, this is amazing. Other people have had these. I'm not bonkers. Wow. And they were described exactly the same things. They've even got a little questionnaire that you can fill out. And, this is great. It does happen to quite a few people. And then the shorter the experience, often the more intense it is. You can, apparently people get slightly longer ones that are less intense, and you can get them when meditating, but you can't seek them. They come and they just happen. And it's the sort of thing, I wish that would happen again. And it doesn't. But it doesn't matter. It's not important. The thing is, you've been there, you've understood it.
Yes.
And you've made that connection that we are all one energy. We are all connected.
Yes.
The individual isn't, well, the individual matters, but the individual matters from the point of view of the whole of us, helping all of us, being part of all of us.
Right. Yes. And it's a question of trying to move into alignment, the personality that feels separate, trying to move that into alignment with the reality of oneness is our task, right? Spiritually speaking. I was curious about the children, and after Mary's death, I know they went to orphanages and they were adopted by different families. Were they able to maintain contact with one another after their adoption?
The boys, first of all, they're all sent to orphanages in Dublin. One of the boys managed to break out and went back home. And after that, they were sent all the way down to Cork, so they could never do it again.
Oh.
The one who was adopted was the baby. She was adopted by a family member and taken away. And they didn't see her again. They just didn't see her again at all. So the girls were still in contact with each other, and the boys were still in contact with each other. But then they lost contact as they joined the army. They moved on with their lives. So there was a little coincidence. One of the boys was working in Australia as a machine operator, and he bumped into somebody who said, "Oh, I know that name. I know somebody else by that name." And it turned out he was a friend of his brother. So he managed to get contact with his brother again through this coincidence. And so they all got in contact, the boys got in contact with each other about 5 years before I did my research. If I had done my research earlier, I wouldn't have been able to make the connection with all of the children, because the one I made contact with wasn't that interested. But he put me in, because he was in contact with Sonny, he gave me Sonny's details, and then we were able to pull everything together. The girls I had to find through newspaper adverts and a bit of research over several years. So they hadn't really had much contact with each other, and the girls hadn't seen the boys since they were since they were children.
I see. So you really brought them all together.
Yes. Yes.
And you did manage to make contact with all of them.
All of the survivors.
Yes.
We found out.
Who
Yeah.
had already passed on.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What a beautiful thing. Anyone in this audience who hasn't seen the movie, it's so moving. And especially, of course, that scene where, you know, she brings them together for the first time. So beautiful, called Yesterday's Children, and you can watch it on YouTube. Jane Seymour plays Jenny.
Yes.
The different last name.
Yes.
And what was it like emotionally when you arrived in Malaheid for the first time as Jenny?
For the first time, and as I said, it was that sudden realization that you know, time, it doesn't stand still, and that you're there, and I'm sort of recognizing it. Overwhelmingly relief. Relief that I'd managed, it was all going to happen. I'd managed to find it. It was okay. I could carry on. Yeah, I'd say overwhelmingly it was relief at that stage. Yeah, that there was a chance to solve it.
Were you a consultant for the film? Did they ask you to consult?
Not much. And I think that was an idea at some stage, but I got one or two questions, but not much. I think one of the odd ones was, have you ever had a sort of psychic experience while you're driving the car? And I said, well, no, because you're driving a car. That's why they put the car crash in. And I thought, no, that's never happened.
Yes.
When you're concentrating on driving the car, you're not in the relaxed state of mind that you need to have something happen. Yeah. It's totally different. So I wouldn't have crashed the car. Why did they do that?
Yeah. I know, dramatic effect.
Yeah, I think they're one or two bits. But as I said, it didn't matter too much, right, because it brought the idea to a wider audience, and that's not a bad thing. So
yeah, the essentials yes. There. Yeah, yes. And fun, I thought. So were your memories of Malaheid confined to your adult life after marriage, or do you also have memories of your childhood in that life, because they were not in the movie?
No. There's one of the researchers, I've been actually looking this up recently, the children who remember past lives, it tends to be the last few years of their life or the death. So most of my memories were that part of the life, not earlier. We did possibly a bit under hypnosis that would have gone earlier, but I was so there was so much of that just didn't work. I mean, it's a funny medium anyway, that I'm not sure whether it was right or not. So it didn't really help very much. So no, most of the memories tend to be the later part of the life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In your book, Past Lives Eternal, because I should have mentioned that Jenny has written 4 books. In your book, Past Lives Eternal, which is, I believe, the 4th book, you indicate a certain ambivalence about relying on hypnosis for past life memory.
Yeah, there has been quite a lot of research into how regression hypnosis works. The problem is hypnosis itself is a brilliant tool. It produces a dreamlike state where you can use imagination to help get over and resolve issues. But with regression hypnosis, of course, you don't want to be using the imagination. You don't want the dreamlike state. You want to try and remember some real stuff. And I found that whenever I was asked a question, they were very direct questions, and I tended to answer. If I didn't know the answer, I answer as me. So I'd be asking, well, I'd answer as Jenny. I was asked things like, would you have brothers and sisters? And I thought, well, yeah, I've got 2 brothers. And then I gave my older brother's middle name, and I was answering Jenny. And then the dates, it was the same. I'd be answering as Jenny. And I found it was quite difficult. I mean, I went through the whole thing. Recently, I've been going through comparing the verified details, the memory, with what came up under hypnosis. And I've asked other people who've had both, who've had memories as child and have tried hypnosis as well. And we've all found the same thing. Because we already had the memory, we knew what we were going to look at. So we tended to look at the same thing. So you're in the same area. But whenever you're asked a question that isn't to do with the memory you already have, it just goes awry. It doesn't help at all. So the names were as good as useless, except that memory is, I think, holistic. So even under hypnosis, I did answer a lot as Jenny because I was still there as Jenny, but I could answer, could pick things from almost any time. So I would sometimes pick things, similar names. So when I was asked as a young Mary what my surname was, I gave the name Sullivan, which is very close to Sutton in my mind, the way I remember names anyway. It's S-U and then a double letter. And the hypnotist wasn't happy with that. He said, well, but I was asking you as a young Mary, you wouldn't want to marry Mary, so you shouldn't have answered it that way. I thought, yeah, but I did. it's just how you think. And I think this is the problem. I think you'd need to be a brilliant psychologist to get the hypnosis to work properly. And I don't know that it would work properly. I mean, there have been so many researches on looking at how people remember under hypnosis, and it really is not a good tool for that, which is why it's not used in a court of law. It's not reliable enough, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But having said that, there were some things that were useful. What was useful is that some of the memories I always had, I spoke about under hypnosis before I managed to trace the family. So the line of research ties in nicely, because I can say, yeah, I said that, it was recorded before I actually got to the place and confirmed it. So that sort of thing was useful. Also, it did bring up, although most of it wasn't much use, there were 2 or 3 things that came up that I hadn't really thought about much before. And one of those was the snare and the hair that was caught in the snare, that helped me, helped Sonny understand that I was actually talking about something that had happened that he could recognize. So it was a mixture, but it's so complicated trying to weed out the stuff that worked and the stuff that didn't work, that when I first started researching, I just put all of the hypnosis to one side, thought, well, it's just rubbish, and concentrated on the memories I already had. It was only later I realized, but that did come up under hypnosis, but it was just a handful of stuff. For all the sessions, it was just a handful of stuff.
One thing that I wondered about, on page 53 of, now I can show the book.
All right.
I came alive again. It says, how I was going through the torments of separation from the children. Locke told me that they had long since grown up and had lived their own lives for many decades, but needed to know what had happened so that I could allow them to grow up in my memory as they had done in reality.
Exactly. That's what I was saying, is you get this being stuck in time. Part of you is stuck in
Yes.
time and doesn't accept that time has passed. And yeah, so I think that's such an important thing, to be
Yes.
able to let go, move on, and accept that time has passed.
Yes. Can you describe, was there, was in the film, and I don't know how accurate this is, but was there one moment, I read your book years ago and I started reading it again in preparation for this interview, but I didn't get to the last couple of chapters. Was there one moment, as in the movie, where you suddenly meet all of them? I mean, you met Sonny first, and then all of a sudden they're all there, right?
Yeah. I met Sonny first, then I managed to trace Phyllis, and Phyllis came over and met Sonny in his house, and I went up and met her.
I see.
Then I met Frank with Phyllis at the airport once when we were doing some photographs for the book. I went with a publisher. But I didn't meet all of the family until there was a program, Strange But True, that was just around the publication date. And they got all the family together and flew Sonny and us out to Dublin. And we went to Betty's house. That's the youngest, Elizabeth. And that was the first time you all met. I remember somebody asked me when you were acting that part when you all got together. I said, we weren't acting. I said, I can't act. I wouldn't know how to. That really was the first time we all met. And there were awkward questions, and we dealt with them. I dealt with some of the awkward questions. And it was Sonny. He was sitting there at the table, and he said, well, so this thing with Jenny, how do you see it? What do you see this happening here? And I thought, oh, devil. Yes, all right. He was as a kid, he was incredibly straightforward, and he was being the one always to sort of come up and say something like that. But and they went round the table and said how they saw it. And Phyllis said she saw it as her mother working through me. Betty was somewhat in agreement, but reticent to say anything. Frank had a near-death experience, and he was very much more accepting, but incredibly quiet. He was a very quiet child as well. Christy accepted it. Sonny accepted it as reincarnation, but I think they were a little worried about how I'd respond to the different views. So I had to actually say to them, look, it doesn't matter to me how you see it. What matters to me is how you feel. Are you comfortable with this? You don't have to see it the way I do. Nobody's telling you how to look at the world. That's not what it's about. Are you comfortable? Are you happy with this? Are you happy with your own view, the way you look at things? That's what mattered. But then, of course, they were my children. I didn't want to have to sort of constrict them to my views. I've always believed that people should have their own views of things, their own interpretation. Mm-hmm. So yes, we really did just have that first day when we got together quite a bit more after that, because every time somebody wanted to do a bit of a documentary or something, we all had to get together and see each other again. Which was...
And did you feel that the unfinished business, in a sense, was finished, or was at least?
Yeah, I think I did. Once I allowed them to grow up in my mind, once I let go and realized that they're not children.
That they were okay.
Yeah, they're okay. They're okay. Yes, they'd been through some things, but it's like every life. They'd had some ups and downs, and they'd all managed to find themselves a reasonable life, some happiness. And I had to just step back and let go. Yeah. And
you were in your 40s?
Yes.
When you met them, and they were in their 60s?
60s, 70s, yes. Yes.
That's quite amazing. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
So, in your book, Past Lives Eternal, you write about other lives you've remembered. How many past lives Do you remember?
Oh, funny you should say that. I don't actually know. I have to kind of go through them. The three that the three most immediate are in my mind, but I had little bits of all sorts of different lives. One of the ones I used to love going through as a child was as a hunter-gatherer hunter, and with a hut by the water, and it was I had to go through the entering adulthood challenge, and I had to go out on my own and survive for a number of days on my own, and it was just such a lovely memory. There's absolutely no way you could verify any of it. It didn't even occur to me as a child that you'd want to, but there were other bits. I remember being a child servant in France, and just often they were just separate single images that I couldn't necessarily piece together. One or two bits turned up again in hypnosis, and again I wasn't sure how much of it was memory. Some of the bits I recognized. I don't know, maybe if I put all the pieces together, about a dozen.
Mm-hmm.
The further back you go, apart from the lovely hunter-gatherer one, which you don't know. I mean, that could have been, because there are still people who live hunter-gatherer lives. It could have been any time.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, it could.
But I imagine that Mary Sutton's life was the one that had the most.
Yeah, absolutely. That was the one that not a week went by that I didn't think about my life as Mary Sutton. Yeah.
Have you seen a progression of the ones that you know in terms of time, timeline, when they occurred? Have you seen a progression throughout the lives in terms of gaining wisdom and maturity from one life to another? Is there evidence of evolution of consciousness when you consider them chronologically, in spite of possible regressions in life circumstances? I'm not talking about that.
I know what you mean. I know. Yeah, I do. I do know what you're looking for. The answer is, I don't really know, because you are, when you think of yourself, even if you think of yourself over a lifetime, actually, yes, you do. Even over a lifetime, you learn and you change. Right. So I think at that speed, probably no more. And then each time you get a new life, it's a slight step back, because you've got to remember and learn all over again. So yeah, there probably is. But when you're thinking about yourself, you're always on the inside. The lives are linear, and you remember them. So you can remember back to. I can remember back to my childhood. I can remember back to my previous adulthood and previous childhood, and so it goes back in a line. But you still feel like the same person on the inside. You're probably too objective to actually be subjective enough to notice any sort of development or change. It's always a difficult question then, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I ask is that in Spiritist studies, which I teach, it says, it teaches that we never regress. We always progress. How can you regress?
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's understandable.
To talk again, you have to learn to walk again. Yes. But in terms of the wisdom that you've accumulated from life to life, that's never lost. And so you can stand still. You may not make much progress in a given lifetime if you're interested in progressing, but you never go back. It always
that would make sense. I mean, all I can think, the maternal thing, the caring thing, has been there for as long as I can remember, for as many lives as I can remember.
Yes.
The need to care. So again, only it is difficult to see what progression, but I think that perhaps that's it. Perhaps in this life I've learned even more about the needs of others.
Yeah, that's interesting. what do you think? Do you have any memories of past life recall in other lifetimes? You know, like if
Oh, I know. Yeah. Not really. The closest I got was when I was Mary, the only ornament I had was Oriental. Before Mary, I was Japanese. So that's the only thing. So I think I think to actually remember past lives, you need all the things that they say. You need to have been a unfinished business, sudden death, often young, unexpected. But I think you also need the right hardware. So you have all the emotional side of it, but I think you need to have almost the right inherited brain that works that way.
Right.
My family, my great grandmother was considered psychic. They used to call it Fae then. I remember one of my great aunts. She knew there's a ship coming in with her father, and she wasn't. It was supposed to be secret manoeuvres, and she said, "He's coming back tonight. He's coming back on this ship," and they didn't know. They had to say to her, "Well, no, we don't know if he's coming back," and he did. He came back that night on that ship, and everybody was so surprised. But that sort of thing turns up in the family a lot, and I've got several people in the family who have some past life memory. So I think it's a lot of the children who have past life memory, when you look at the research, have a parent who also admits to having had past life memory as a child that they might not remember now. Yep. So I think it's having the right hardware as well.
Yes. Did any of your siblings have past life memory?
My older brother died quite when he was in his 30s, and we didn't talk about that. My younger brother has probably, it's up to his story. I'm not supposed to tell you other people's stories, am I? But there are other people in the family, yes, who have bits. We've discussed it. Or sometimes it's all just small memories, but yeah. Other people.
I'm getting a few chats, but so I'm going to just hold them until half an hour. In about half an hour, we'll open it up to questions from the audience. Can you tell us about, you mentioned about remembering, so remembering isn't quite the word, but
no, it is actually very much the word. It is just memory.
Yeah,
it's exactly the same as any other memory.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm saying you mentioned about future lives, remembering future lives.
Yeah, that's yeah, I did. Part of that again. I've always had odd precognitive experiences. So I'll see something that happened. I mean, I'll give you one, for example, so because you need to do just step by step. When I was 16, I had, I think it was a dream actually, but that I was parking, I was in an estate car and I was reversing into a parking space. I checked the mirror and my two blonde-haired children were in the seats behind me. I glanced up in front when they stopped and there was a tower, ruin of a castle, and a tumbled down wall. And it was a very odd dream. And I told my older brother's friend, school friend, about it. Then I'm trying to think how many years later, 20 years later, I was out for the day and I reversed my estate car into a parking spot, looked at my two blonde-haired children in the back, glanced up and realized there it was. There was the tower, there was the crumbling wall. It was this day. Now that sort of thing's happened to me lots and lots and lots and lots of times.
Yes.
So one day I was, we were coming back from a friend's house and got the little light going through the trees thing going on again. And I put my hand through my hair and it felt different. I thought, that's strange. And I glanced down and I was looking at the body of a small Asian child. And I wasn't asleep or anything. I looked to my husband and I said, something a little odd is happening in a minute. I'll tell you about it later. And I just absorbed the rest of it and experienced it. And then when it stopped, I told him, well, that was really odd. I said, I was just for a moment there, it felt like future.
Mm.
And at that stage, I hadn't entirely given up on the hypnosis and used that. But we'd also, see, this is the thing that hypnosis might be useful for. I did a little experiment when we were doing the regression, which wasn't very good. But this little experiment was, I was asked while I had my eyes shut, if I could tell him what was on top of a cupboard. He said, drift up, tell me what's on top of the cupboard. So I did, and I told him what's on top of the cupboard. And it wasn't what he'd hidden. I saw what was there that he'd forgotten about, which was there was a record deck up there. So I told him about that. So I realized for that purpose, it did seem to work, since I had the ability anyway. But he did his usual thing of trying to look at different personalities in the future, and I don't entirely trust that. Mm-hmm. So we came up with these different names and dates, and I really didn't trust that, but the publishers wanted it in the book. Mm-hmm. But what I did see was a number of things that I had always seen. I've always seen floods. I've always seen climate change. I remember when I was, it was in the 1960s, I tried to tell my teacher that we were having global warming. I didn't use those words. I said there's a problem, that everything's warming up too much, too fast. And they nonsense. So I always had that. But one of the things that I saw that was under hypnosis was I described, he said, what is there in the future that's, describe something, which was a nice open question. It wasn't like his usual, anyway, it was a nice open question for a change. And I said there's a laser microscope that can be used for looking at living tissue. And I forgot about it. Book was published, and I was away for a couple of days with my husband. We were sitting in a cafe having a coffee, and there was a newspaper there, and I picked it up, and it's the one my mother had, and it has a science page. So I turned to the science page, and I read about this invention of a prototype laser microscope capable of looking at living tissues. But it was word for word what I'd said a year or so earlier. And then some of the other things I saw started to happen. That I'd seen, you've probably seen them, that there were advertising boards with a video picture on instead of a piece of paper wrapped around it with a picture, but it was a bit moving, and they appeared about 10 years later. I saw shops with huge sort of cinema-sized screens advertising things, and then they're quite common now. But I also saw people, this was before the internet, I saw people working from home, talking to each other face to face using a screen. So all these things have happened. So when I looked at this, tried to see again this child I'd seen, I had some bits that I thought were likely. I mean, I got the sense that it was in Nepal. I got kind of a first name, but some of the stuff I saw is possible. I saw the color of the soil, and somebody researched for me, and it's a sort of really weird, like a red sort of crumbly clayish sort of. I said, yeah, well, that is the soil there, and the religion was a mixture of two different religions, and we discovered that the area that I thought it was a mixture of these two different religions. So who knows? I mean, you can't. It's quite speculative, but what fun! I mean, what a possibility. Yes. But the actual personalities, not so much, because again, it's hypnosis, and you can take it a little way, but you can't accept all of it, because there's just too much room for imagination to creep in.
I see. So the future lives were not spontaneous memories; they were through hypnosis.
One was spontaneous. I only wanted to look at the one.
Oh, I see.
No, that's how it goes. Yeah, I did only want to look at the one. I only just wanted one session to look at the one, but yeah. But some of the other things I saw turned out to be right. So yeah, I would ignore all the personalities and the dates. And just pick the changes.
Yes, I know Brian Weiss has a book on progressing people into
All right.
lives through hypnosis. I haven't read it yet. I have it, but I haven't gotten to it yet. Did you read that book?
No, I haven't come across that.
Oh, okay. Don't remember the name of it right this minute, but I know it was Brian Weiss who wrote Many Lives, Many Masters, about regressing people into previous life recall. And yeah, I think that when it comes to that, you know, we've had Linda Backman at Caritas several times. She's given presentations, and I think she's very good. And she's a hypnotist and a psychologist, and she does a lot of past life regression hypnotherapy. And I asked her one time, you know, how can you tell, or can you tell, whether someone is really actually recalling a previous life or if it's coming from their imagination? And she said there are certain clues that you can look for. And this very moment, I don't remember what they were, but she did specify several things that you could look for that would indicate that it was actually past life recall, but that sometimes it was imagination, although she found that even if it's imagination, to work with it, you know, therapeutically is
exactly. Yeah, I think that's the key. It is if you look at it as a therapeutic side, then
yes.
it doesn't matter that it's imagination. As far as it comes to proving the cases, there have been several thousand cases proven from children who remember past lives.
Oh yes.
I think it's 5 hypnosis cases.
Oh,
and a lot more people do the hypnosis than there are the children remember. So I think you have to assume that it's not about necessarily actual people. I mean, it's slightly different because I went in with a memory anyway, so I knew what I wanted to look at.
Right.
But I've talked to other people who've had, I think I was saying earlier, people who've had past life memories from children and hypnosis, and we found the same problems. You did see what you expected to see, but there was just so much other stuff that you knew wasn't right that would come in. And I think it's because the way hypnosis works, that it works on a similar understanding as dreams. And in dreams, you compile how you feel about things in order to understand situations or to understand yourself. And I think a lot of time that same thing is happening, which is brilliant from the point of view of therapy.
Yes.
And then it doesn't matter if it's real or not.
Right. Yeah. I would think it would have something to do with, or maybe a lot to do with, the actual practitioner, you know, because some people may suggest things.
And sometimes, you know, I got this. You sometimes the things will be suggested just in the way the question is asked, or sometimes. I mean, I always thought when you're asked, "What's the date?" And you give a date. And it would be a cross between my grandmother's birthday and my son's birthday. And I think, that's very good. But if it's, do you know the date? Do you know when this is? That's so much gentler. And then, well, no, I don't know. Or I think it might be. That actually works better. So yes, and I did get quite a lot of, for mine, assertive questions. And my husband went and had some regression because he was interested. Thought he'd have a go, and he told me about after, and it was a totally different experience. It was much gentler and no pressure, and you know, safe place. So yeah, I think it does. It depends what sort of person. I don't think what I get got happens anymore. Anyway, I think most realise now it's 90% therapy. To give people the space to just work through what they need to work through. And if it happens to come up with something that is real, then that's just a bonus. That's not what it's about. It's about trying to understand yourself and what you need to work through.
I think that many people have ahas, we call them ahas in dream work, through hypnosis, where suddenly they realize something that has impacted their lives and they didn't know, just like when you were describing your life as 6-year-old Charles in England, who had his legs crushed by the truck, right? And you were always afraid that a truck was going to come, that kind of thing, or even pain sometimes, pain that doctors cannot find a cause for, sometimes through hypnosis, recalling the origin of that pain in a past life, because there doesn't seem to be any cause in this present life, will even alleviate the pain. So there are many therapeutic.
Yes, yeah.
As you say, I agree.
I think that's its purpose, really, mostly is therapeutic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think that some people recall past lives in dreams as well.
Well, yes, part of it. Normally, yes, you do. I mean, mine was mostly memory, but the dream was the bit that it was all. The dreams were always deaths. Mostly Mary's death. It was the bit that you don't want to look at.
I see.
Dreams.
Yes. Yes. Oh, that's very interesting.
Mm.
Yeah, because in our waking life, we filter, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, we do.
Yes.
Yes.
And one of the benefits of dreams is that the filter is gone.
And that's what they're for. They're for you to work through how you feel about things. So that's when something that's painful is likely to come up in a sort of, often in a very different form. I remember once, because I even as a child, I think I understood dreams, and I realized you can change them. If it's not working well. I think I understand that's lucid dreaming, but for me that was just dreaming. I was always aware I was dreaming, but I tried changing my dream of dying as Mary once, and I woke up, it was even worse, because I knew that's not what happened, and I knew I couldn't change it, because I knew that it was real.
Yeah.
Different.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, the best use of lucid dreaming is to cooperate with the dream.
Yes.
So in terms of the time in between lives, there's very little memory of that.
Just that sense of being surrounded by lots of other energies and a sort of timeless. I understand some children have some sort of memory of selecting their parents. There was one I was reading, I can't remember the name because I'm useless at the names, but he said that he saw his parents on a beach, and he described the hotel. And his parents said afterwards that, yes, actually, that was the hotel they were at before she became pregnant with this child. So I think it's quite likely that some people are drawn to their parents. I didn't really have any kind of memory of that. Sadly, I mean, it would have been nice to remember things, but I don't. I don't remember that.
Yeah. Well, as you say, you remember the recent past person of the lifetime that you're remembering. I know Jim Tucker says, when children remember lives where they died as children, they talk about their parents. But in a life where they died as an adult, as Mary Sutton did, they talk about their children or their spouse.
It's who you're attached to.
So much talk about their parents, because it's not what's vivid in their memory when they pass on.
Yes, it is. It's whatever it was that was on your mind in those last moments, probably. Yes. The thing that was most important, the images that were going through your mind.
Yes.
Yeah,
and so. Something I've always wondered, I remember years ago reading a book called The Girl with the Green Eyes, about a young teenager who remembered past life very vividly through hypnosis. But then she started getting more and more images in her waking life.
Mm.
And it became very confusing, where she felt that part of the time she was because she was so curious about this other life. And so part of the time she was thinking about that life, and part of the time she was thinking about her schoolwork and her friends in this life.
Mm.
And it became too difficult to handle. And so she stopped.
It does. It's funny you should say that. There is a failure to engage. I mean, I found, certainly when I was growing up, I remember being accused of not taking life seriously. And I think it's because I found it difficult to take life seriously, because I didn't feel totally engaged in this life. This life didn't feel real. It was my past lives that felt real. I moved past it. Certainly by the time I had children, you have to be in the here and now when you've got children to look after. But I think for a long time, I'd make arbitrary decisions, and I didn't really try very hard at school, because I didn't really feel part of the here and now. So yeah, it can be a huge problem, that not engaging with the present. And it's something I must research, because I'm not sure how common that is with people who have past life memories.
I think that's probably, metaphysically speaking, I think that's probably why we tend not to remember previous.
Oh, it's dreadful, really. From that, it is. I don't think.
That said, I think there's also a very good reason why some of us do, right?
Yes.
Someone like you, I really think you came in with this mission.
I think what it is, I have a feeling that we tend to work on many different levels. We work on the individual level, but I also think we are all connected, and sometimes you need somebody who will do something for the community.
Yes.
Whatever it is, you need people who have the ideas. I'm not talking about me now, I'm talking about scientists, right? Somebody will have the ideas that will help others. Or you just need, not everybody can have the same thing. So it was I actually look at it almost as a sacrifice. But in order to share the idea, I needed to immerse in the experience.
Yes.
I would say that I've been driven to share. Sorry?
It became such a big part of this life that's why, I tend to think it was really a mission.
Yes.
That you had beyond, it worked very well therapeutically for you, but it also, worked for the larger community.
Which is what I think it was for. If it was just for me, I think it would be kind of pointless. It has to be for everybody, because we're a community. We are a people. We're not isolated.
I think we are going to have quite a few questions, so I'm going to open it up a little sooner than I was planning to, just because, I can think of questions forever, but I want to give the audience a chance to ask what's on their mind about this. And I will start with a couple that I see in the chat. Let's see, from Greg Morey. He just commented that he said, I've had one of those experiences where I was one with everything as well. It was so
brilliant. Yes. Pleased to hear that. They're absolutely amazing experience. It's always nice to hear somebody else who's had one of those.
Yes.
But look it up on that. I don't know what they're called. They're Australian. There's a questionnaire there, and they map it all out, and it just makes you feel so normal. It's lovely.
Yeah, I think it's becoming more and more normal.
I think people are talking more. I think that's what it is. People are being more open.
So many people that I've known have had experiences like that. And, we hear about some that get written about, for instance, the astronaut Edgar Mitchell, which prompted him to start noetic sciences. When he saw the Earth from outer space, he had this incredible experience of oneness, and and when he got back, he was so blown away by that experience that he decided that when he retired from NASA, he would start an institute to study consciousness because he wanted to know more
Brilliant.
about those states, those
Yes.
amazing oneness states. And also from Greg Morey, does Jen have a way to teach people how to help children to recognize past lives through questions, etc.?
Funny you should say that. I'm writing again, and what the first thing I dealt with was what do you do with children with past life memories? How do you deal with them? So I think the main thing is you need to listen. Don't ask too many questions. Help them to feel validated, and give them a chance to move on, because often all they need to do is unburden themselves. I mean, some children will keep on, is that you do need to do the research, you do need to find out who it was, and then you probably ought to have some help if you meet the other family. But on the whole, they just want to let go. So just give them that chance, that space to help them talk, without pushing them for questions. No, so they know they're safe, they know that it's all right, that it's not wrong, they're allowed to, and be there for them. They just need support.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and Do Verger says, does she recognize today people around her with whom she shared past lives? Have you ever met someone?
That's a difficult one. I mean, I do have one of my children. Before I had children, I felt my hand being held. And when my son was born, I thought, it's my son. Only it wasn't. I kept feeling this hand being held. And it carried on until my daughter was born. So I'd felt that there was a longer connection there. But apart from that, not really. It's not. I mean, we're all good at different things. That's not something I'm good at, recognizing people from past lives, but I know other people can.
Yes. It happens, and sometimes we don't remember. I had an experience where I met someone who actually a couple of people in this life who I'm sure I had a relationship with in a past life. But I don't remember what the relationship was. No. It's interesting.
And I have had that happen where you get this sense that you know somebody. Why you shouldn't.
Like you meet them for the first time and you just know all about them.
Yes, weird.
Who they are.
Okay, I admit I have had that. Yeah.
Yeah. One of them I dreamed about before I met her, about 6 months before.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. Oh, that's lovely.
So Lenabelle Wesley is asking, you have such a pleasant, approachable, down-to-earth manner. I loved hearing you talk. Do you have any advice to give regarding being a parent or your children/grandchildren? I imagine. Lenabelle, do you want to just elaborate a little bit on that question? What kind of advice are you looking for?
Oh, I was just thinking, to do this or don't do this. I misworded it. I meant to say regarding being a parent or grandchildren. I mean, was there something that you look back on and you think, oh, that was a really good thing, that I'm glad I did that, or, I shouldn't have done this. Like, even in this life, being a regular person, I don't want to repeat some of the patterns that happened to me as a child with my parents and stuff.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. It's not repeating the patterns that you had when you were a child. I had the same thing. There were things that I knew I wanted to change. So what I did with my parenting was, the main thing I did was listen. Rather than telling, actually listening and discussing and validating. Because that's the sort of thing I didn't feel I had. So yeah, just being there for them.
Have either of you have 2 children, right?
Yes.
Have either of your children expressed any past life memory?
No, no.
Yeah.
But I got the normal thing that there were a few things when they were little that they said.
Right.
Well, one of them, the childminder who used to look after one of them, said, "He's been talking French again."
Oh, that's funny. That's
Yeah.
funny. Yeah.
So it was a normal, just a single comment,
Right.
and a little bit of behavioural, but
Yeah.
nothing more than that. So I would have said that was probably average.
Yes. Yes. My daughter, when she was 2.5, we were driving in the car and suddenly she said, "Mommy, I remember when I was a big girl and you weren't my mommy and Kalandra wasn't my sister."
Yeah.
And I said, "Yes, yes."
Yes.
She said,
That's a bit more than average.
"I remember." No, she said, "I just remember." She had nothing more to say.
Oh.
And I didn't want to push her, but I was
Well, no, that's it. That's what I think you do. You don't push. You listen, you validate, make them feel comfortable, and often they'll just move on and get back into the here and now, and that's all they need.
Yeah. Okay, that's it for the chat. So anyone have a question? Yes, Nancy, unmute yourself.
Okay, I wanted to know if I only saw the movie. Did not read the book. But in the movie, you had a very supportive husband in the movie, as Jenny. Did you ever know who he was in the past life to you and the relation? And if you can't understand me, tell me to repeat because I have a disability. Okay.
So you mean my? I mean, I have got a very supportive husband. He did help. In the film, they added a little bit of conflict there. We didn't get any of that. I think they just added that for dramatic effect. He was.
Do you know who he was?
No.
Do you know who he was?
Before, no.
That was my question. Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
It makes such a difference, you know. I think that with Ian Stevenson's research and Jim Tucker,
yes,
especially initially, almost all the cases were, you know, not here, but in Eastern countries where they
were. Yes, where people are more accepting, and then now there are lots and lots here. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
It shows the progression of the, you know.
It is different. Even in the 30 years that I've been talking about this, I've seen a tremendous change, which is brilliant. Much more open and accepting. And I mean, you'll get people who are critical or skeptical or whatever, which is fine. Everybody's allowed their own point of view, but to have the chance to just talk, be open about it, it's much better.
Anybody else have a question? Oh, that's funny. I thought we were going to have millions.
I have a question, Gloria. First, thank you so much for joining us today. This was so lovely. And I felt like I learned so much about you and your experiences, as well as how we understand remembering. So thank you for that. I was wondering if your experiences have made you a more open person to like cultural differences and understandings, like and I'm asking this from the perspective of like kind of like our current moment in the world. And wondering if we remembered more, if we would be more open to others.
That's a lovely question. Yes, I think I don't think it's made much difference for me because I have always had the memories. I've always thought that we move around with this person, this place, with that person, that place. But you're absolutely right. We're all the same. We are all the same. You can crop up anywhere. You can crop up in different nationalities. You can crop up in different places. And it would be good if people would start to accept on many levels that we're all the same and we're all connected. I mean, I see us as having individual minds, but I also see us at some level being connected, almost like a hive mind, that we are actually one unit of energy as well as being separate units of energy. And to get that across, that we're not different, we're not separate, we're actually the same thing. even to the point of being one organism in a way, at one level joined. And yeah, I think that's a very important point to bring up.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else?
I have a question. Right at the beginning, I was thinking about how your past lives might create some internal conflict, and you kind of touched on it a little bit. I'd be curious to hear about how you personally handled that internal conflict between your present life and past lives, and how that impacted your life.
What I did was I became totally obsessed with trying to find my past lives, and I pushed and I pushed and I pushed to try to solve everything. And even when I had managed to solve my life as Mary, I kept on and just did absolutely everything I could to solve as much as I could. If you read through the course of the books, this is why I didn't stop writing. Not because it was just, so I did all that as therapy to try to come to terms with having had the memories. And yes, it is difficult. It's not an easy thing. But at the same time, I think that's what I was supposed to do. You know, that's what I was supposed to do with it. So yeah, I handled it badly.
Oh, I don't think so. I think you did very
I did what I needed to do.
There's a place in your book where you say, the very first time I heard the sound of the Gaelic
Yes.
voice, a door seemed to open to a different older world, which held a strange sense of mystery and beauty. I felt sure that Mary had enjoyed such music, but had no memory of when that might have been. I'm wondering how much of the memories are triggered. Of course, it could differ from person to person.
Yeah. Music, smells, sounds, touch, all sorts of things. When I grew up, it was in the 60s, and there was lots of pop and rock, and I hated it. And I never went to discos. I really did not enjoy modern music at all. Then I heard, I think it was the Chieftains was first, some proper Irish, and I thought, that's music. Nobody else believed me. But I found out actually there was, because I could remember, it was on the list of comparisons, I could remember walking occasionally away from the town a couple of times a year, and I couldn't remember what it was about. And it was Sonny who was saying, that's when they used to have crossroads dancing, and they'd have the musicians meet up where there was an intersection in the road. And some of the locals would get together and have a bit of a ceilidh, bit of fun, which made perfect sense to me. I mean, that did make perfect sense to me, that's what it was about. That was the memory. But yeah, there are lots of triggers to memory. Sometimes it's going to a place, sometimes it's a sound, sometimes there'll be something like music. Different people, different triggers. But a lot of people, it is just visiting a location and looking and thinking, that is very familiar. I know my way around. I know what's down that street. And that's happened quite a few people.
Yeah.
Because you can get memories suddenly, spontaneously occur as an adult. Now, I think probably what's happened is that there have been childhood memories that have been forgotten.
Yes.
And then something happens as an adult and they come back, a bit like they did in the film.
Right.
Which didn't happen, that wasn't how it happened, but they did in the film like that.
I think sometimes we remember things and we think we're remembering from this life, but when we look back, that never happened. You know, I remember having that as a child, just here and there, remembering something and then thinking, wait, that never happened. When? And yet it was so real, and I didn't know anything about reincarnation. So, you know, that didn't occur to me.
Facing it in time.
It just confused me. Like, where am I getting that from? Why am I thinking what happened to such and such, you know, because I never had such and such in this life, you know. And So, but I never expressed it out loud. And of course, my parents, well, I'm sure they knew about reincarnation. I don't think they believed in it necessarily. They were Catholic, but they were Brazilian, so they might have known about it. So it might have helped if I had said something, but it never occurred to me. I just kind of wondered at it, you know. Also in the book, and when I say the book, I'm talking about Across Time and Death.
Mm.
There's a statement that I wondered if you could elaborate on. It says, I could not grow into my own life properly because there was not enough there. I had the love of my mother to keep me going and a desire to try to protect my brothers, but there was so little else to enjoy or find meaning in. My escape into the past grew as I grew, and it was like a little death in my own life, a death of part of me that replaced part of my life.
Like I was saying, it was growing up with the past life memory, but life at home was pretty horrible. My father had quite a few problems. He was a gay man who had been kind of persuaded into marriage. He shouldn't have married. And he just became more and more frustrated. He'd also been in a motorbike accident, so he had head injury. So he was prone to get frustrated and lose his temper easily, and that because of that often happens to people who've had head injuries. And it was a horrible, horrible time. We had to be. If he came home from work, we quickly all ran away and hid in our rooms. So yeah, I think that added to the reason that I disappeared into my memories and kept my memories, because I didn't enjoy childhood very much at all.
Right.
I think I hadn't realized when I wrote that book, I hadn't realized that the Asperger's also affected how I related to this life as a child. So it was quite complicated that I wasn't really engaging properly in this life. Yeah.
Well, and that was another trigger.
Yes.
Memories, right?
Yes.
To I've known people who have had difficult early childhoods, and they say, as bad as it was, there was only one place to go, and that was God. You know, that was why I became, you know, spiritually oriented where my family wasn't, you know, that kind of thing. So in your case, it was maybe more comfortable to think about some of these memories. And so the little death was,
each time you shut off from the now, here and now, it was just yeah.
How accurately did the movie portray Mary's husband?
Pretty accurately.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they got that pretty right. He wasn't very nice. I mean, they even managed to choose a fairly well-built, strong-looking chap. So yeah, they he wasn't a very nice person. He was
pretty abusive.
Yes, yes, he was.
And I think in the book, if I'm remembering correctly, you allude to the possibility that the war had changed him.
I think wars do, but the first war, I think, changed a lot of people. Who knows what he was like before?
Right.
There must have been. I mean, I remember. I have some memory of him not being quite like that. I think it was over time. It got worse. That it came back to him and it haunted him, and I do think it had an effect on him. It doesn't excuse. You can't excuse people's behaviour, but it explains it.
Yeah.
I have another question, if that's okay.
Yes, absolutely.
You mentioned something about having this feeling of care that has carried on as you remember previous lives, and I'm wondering if you're like, as you're speaking about Mary's late husband, do the emotions also kept carried on? So like feelings of love towards others, or maybe feelings of
All the
not.
emotions, the whole
All the
thing is about
emotions, yeah.
emotion. Yeah, all of the thing is about feeling.
Mhm.
You don't remember things like the politics, who was in charge at the time. You don't remember reading the newspaper. You remember how it hurts, and you remember the joy, and you remember how things smelt and felt, and how you felt, and hugging the children and touching the fabric. So it's all about how you feel.
Mhm.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, and it coincides with or corresponds with the, when, as one of the functions of dreams is to process the
Information so that you
into
yeah.
the
Hope.
present, the recent memories into past into longer memories, right? And the criteria that the unconscious uses for that, if you want to call it the unconscious, is emotional impact.
Yes.
That's what creates the long-term memories.
Yes.
All the myriad things that happen in the present, right? The ones we remember.
It's a reassessing. Dreams are about reassessing things that have happened to you during the day and making sense of them and evaluating them and deciding what's important and what matters to you.
Right.
Yeah, I think so.
That's why sometimes, I tell I teach dream work, and I tell my students that if you dream about something that happened during that day, let's say you were reading a magazine and suddenly that shows up in your dream, and in the morning you think, oh, well, I just dreamed that because I had been doing that yesterday, I had been looking at that magazine. Well, think of all the other things that you did that day. Why did the dream pick only that thing?
Yes.
And it's because there was significance to that event that even if it seemed very incidental, there was significance to that you missed. And so if you just dismiss it as, that's just day residue, then you're missing the same boat twice.
And missing the whole point of it.
Again, right. It's giving it to you again so that maybe you'll get the significance that this during the day
something
happened, right? So
question.
mhm.
Go ahead, Kathy.
What was it? Oh, I know. You had answered, did you feel a change in consciousness from life to life for the past lives that you had? So it's kind of related to that. But in the lives, did you get a feeling that you came away with certain lessons that you learned, or there was meaning to each life? It seems like this life, it's pretty easy because you're relaying these eye-opening and mind-opening experiences that a lot of people may not have had, or so forth. But in the other previous lives, do you get a feeling that they were for a reason?
I don't know if there's things for a reason on the individual level. I tend to think, I tend to think of us as more than the individual. So I look at what is happening that will help everybody, if that makes sense. So yeah, I do. I don't know, the sort of life lessons thing, I don't think it's necessarily as personal. I think it's more about consciousness of the community, how we evolve socially, all of us, sort of hand in hand, rather than necessarily just individual.
I was also going to say, I visited Ireland in 2008, and I think I had recently, within the previous 10 years or so, really gotten familiar with reincarnation. It just clicked in. And so, I totally believe in reincarnation. But it was when I was visiting Ireland then that if I hadn't already believed in reincarnation, I would then, because it was the same thing. Oh my gosh, I went to these places. They just seemed so familiar, just the energy of the land or the energy of the people, and the music, and I'm just so drawn to that. But there are ruins everywhere, and you can just go walk up to them. We don't have anything like that here. And there'd be these plaques, and I'm, about life there or what happened there. I'm like, it just felt so familiar. I'm just getting chills now. It's like, I know I was there.
But that's lovely. It is that sense of connection, and it may be you'll get another a few more details at some stage, but the sense of connection is enough in itself, isn't it, to feel that you're part of something more.
Yes. Shirley, you had a question?
Yes, I'm not really sure about how to even ask the question because Kathy touched on it a little bit, but I guess I am just, this whole thing is really new to me. I didn't know whether I believed in reincarnation or not. I do, but I didn't know how important it was in your own self-discovery. So in trying to understand maybe where triggers come from for you, why for instance, I am so seem to be in tune with the Native American culture. And so this is all really very new, and stressing, is it important? How important is it for your own personal growth and understanding yourself?
That we remember. Because I've always remembered, it's been something that's been hugely important in my life. I don't know how it is for people who don't remember. I think it must be difficult to have that. It must feel isolating in a way if people don't remember. The lack of connection. But you have mentioned that you do have that connection. You do have that feeling that you're connected to another community, and that's what it's about. It's feeling that you are part of, that you're not alone, that you're part of something bigger, and you always will be part of something bigger.
Are there tendencies that you see in yourself as in this life as Jenny that you can see may have sprung from?
Absolutely. I don't feel that I've changed a great deal from one life to another. I'm the same person looking from the inside, looking out. But also there are quite a lot of things. When my children were young, we were a bit hard up. So I used to get secondhand clothes passed down and pull them apart and reverse the fabric and make things for my children just the way I did when I was Mary in Ireland.
Oh, interesting.
Exactly the same way.
Interesting.
And ever so many things like that. I make my own bread. I love making bread, as I did in Ireland. So everything carries on. Not just some things, everything. You're the same person. You got another bit, you've got all the heritage stuff on top of it, but inside is the same person. And yes, you do carry over a lot of the characteristics. I was fascinated when I first saw a photograph of Mary with Phyllis, I think it was, as a young child, and I looked at the hands and I thought, I still hold my hands like that.
Interesting.
Isn't that strange? I still do that sort of slightly, and the expression in the face, and I thought, yeah, the features are different, but I still do that. So yeah, you're the core. At the core, you're the same person.
Right.
Yeah, everything carries over.
Except I would say that you know, and this is just a guess, but I would say that you have a much broader perspective in this life. Just
because I've had the opportunity to have a broader
exactly.
Yes.
You know, because as Mary, I would think, you know, especially with 8 children, your entire focus was very small.
Looking after, yes,
right?
And the world was very small.
Yes, yeah.
In your past lives that you've been talking about, it sounds like you've always been female. Do you feel like?
No, not always. No, the one, the immediate one, just before I was Jenny, was a boy. in the north of England. That was what I was saying about being run over. A 6-year-old boy. So if I'd stayed there, I would be able to support my brother a bit more. I do support him. My brother from my last life is still about, so we're in contact.
Him, right? You connected with him. It's
Yes.
in other books.
Yes, that worked really well. He was brilliant. Yeah, he was.
Yeah. And if you hadn't died when you did, at 6 years old, you wouldn't be Jenny now.
No, I wouldn't, and I possibly wouldn't have remembered, and I possibly wouldn't have been able to do any of the research, because I like I said, I think to fully remember, you need the memory, you need all those things, but you need to have it in the right hardware for it to work properly. I'm quite sure you do. So you need to actually inherit the right kind of physical, the brain, the way it works, to actually access properly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So no, I wouldn't have been Jenny. I sometimes actually, I a couple of times I've just thought I felt slightly cheated. I would like to have grown up as Charles. I know I wouldn't be me now, but you just occasionally you just think, well, that doesn't. It's only 6 years. It doesn't seem quite. No,
Yeah. Do you have much memory of his parents?
I didn't remember the father. What I didn't know until I just couldn't see him at all. What I didn't know is, of course, it was wartime. Well, he was away, so I assumed it was the wartime. But he died during the war. He died a couple of, I think halfway through the war. So he wasn't coming back anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the grandmother more. I remember the mother, but I remember the grandmother more. And when I was telling John about it, the brother, he said, well, yeah, she was a very caring woman, and she did look after the children more, most of the time. So yeah, I would have remembered her more.
Yeah, because, some say that when a child dies, it's often for, in terms of learning experience, it's not so much the child, but the parents,
The parents find. When I first started to search for the family for Charles, I put it off for years because I was so worried that I would make it hard if the mother was still about. I just didn't want to give her any more pain. But then I was quite disappointed because John said to me she would have liked it. She could have accepted that sort of thing. I thought, and I didn't do it, and I didn't do it soon enough, and I wasn't there, and I could have been. But it was just because it was a child, I didn't want to turn up on her doorstep and say, oh, by the way.
Yeah.
I thought that would be too hard. I thought that would be much too hard.
Yeah.
Not for me, but for her. I thought that would be too hard.
And if one of your children had died as a small child, how would you have reacted to that?
Same as everybody else. It's a horrible thing to lose a child.
No, I mean, I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. How would you have reacted if somebody landed on your doorstep and said,
I see.
You see?
All right. I don't know. I've never actually put myself in that position. I'm not very good at imagining roles. Oh, gosh. I think I would need sufficient evidence.
Right.
I think this is why, because sometimes people come to me and they say, how do you approach the family? I said, well, the first thing is you've got to have something.
Yes.
Only the family can know. You've got to have enough evidence. And secondly, you don't turn up and say, I was.
I know.
Because that's really sort of pushing it in someone's face. You've got to go very gently. You can think about their feelings and how they might react. And you go
even those of us who remember, who believe in reincarnation, who know that reincarnation is a fact, there's so many people, women mostly, who say that they're sure that they were Anne Frank, for instance.
Oh yes, you get a lot.
So you get, and I'm sure
famous person cases. You get
sincere right? I'm
Yes.
not saying that they're deliberately lying, but they just, they relate to it when they read the book.
Yes.
They relate so strongly because maybe they had a lifetime similar to that, or they had that kind of
They
pain
have done.
in their lives, and so they immediately think, oh, that's who I was last time around, So you really would need evidence.
You do. You
Yeah.
do.
Can I ask a question?
Mhm.
Having spent so much of your life, exploring exploring these lives and understanding your memories and getting to know past family members and so forth, what do you think is the point of reincarnation?
I think it's just how it works. I think the energy that life energy was created at the beginning of the universe. There's a need for consciousness. There's a need for life, and the way I look at it is that for life to exist, it can only stay in a physical form for a certain length of time. So it has to have another form. And I think I've explained this before to other people. I think that the universe is two parts that are connected at a subatomic level, and that we exist between those two parts, that we have just the energy form and the physical form. So when we're looking at the reason for reincarnation, I think that's because it's the only way we can exist. It's the only way that life itself can exist, by switching between the two existences. So from my point of view, all life is recycled. All energy is recycled, and probably has been forever, and probably will do, until possibly, there is possibly, if we get to the stage where consciousness develops to a point where we can all join up again and become the one consciousness and be aware that we are one consciousness, that might be the end goal.
Can I follow up with that with another question? If that's the case, do you believe that humans always reincarnate as humans, or do you believe there's a hierarchy there, or do we just reincarnate into all different?
Now, I think you practiced at being human, so it would make more sense if you come back at what you practiced at being. If the process of physical evolution and spiritual evolution are going hand in hand, then it would make sense that you learn to exist in one form and progress in that form. It's quite possible, well, it would have to be, that as animals evolved, the energy would be slowly climbing up the ladder and becoming more evolved along with the physical form. But no, I don't think you wouldn't make a very good whale if you spent 3 lives practicing being a human, because you just wouldn't have a clue how to do it. I think it would be a difficult thing to go into.
I just want to say it was great. I loved your talk, and you got a great manner, and thank you so much, Gloria. And I just thank you very much for your talk. It was a wonderful talk.
Thank you. That's very kind.
Yes, I think we should be wrapping up. Are there any more questions? We can take maybe one more before we go. If not, I have a quick one.
Yeah.
Well, it could probably lead to a long explanation, but we only have 5 minutes. So you mentioned in your book about psychometry.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Such fun. Picking up on echoes. It's again, it's to do with how we're connected with people, that sometimes you can pick something up that somebody has had for a long time and access that person, and that person can be living or dead. It makes no difference. Mm-hmm. I remember when I first sort of started trying it, one of the things I discovered was I don't like holding things that belong to people with asthma, because I feel I can't breathe properly. You start to get all the feelings of the person. But yeah, I haven't done that enough recently. Well, all this not being able to go and see people and browse around shops and pick things up. And yeah, I did an experiment some years ago. There was I think it was my son's teacher who was taking a degree with their upgrading the qualifications for teaching. And she asked me to be part of an experiment where they did an electroencephalogram with the wires stuck to your head, electroencephalograph, and check the readout to see if there was a change when you were doing something psychic. And the something psychic I did was psychometry. It was about the only thing I could do that is spontaneous, not spontaneous, that I can actually concentrate on rather than just having to wait weeks for it to happen. They gave me a few sort of questions and things to think about first, and I think that the little things were going up and down, and then they gave me the thing to hold, and I calmed down and took myself deep inside and just relaxed. And then this electroencephalograph spiked, absolutely spiked, with the intense concentration. And I started to describe this, the woman, her house and things about her life and what she'd been doing. And then she got spooked and took it back. But it did show that it actually takes quite a lot of concentration, which in itself is lovely, because it's really nice to be able to totally concentrate. But yeah, I've tried that a few times over the years, and it is interesting. I did once manage, somebody gave me something that had belonged, well, she didn't tell me much about it. She said, I've heard you can do this. It was at one of the nursing homes I was working at, one of the nurses there. She said, I've heard you can do this. Could you hold this for me? And I held it, and I said, oh, yes, I am seeing something. There's a wall and it's painted. I like that shade of blue. And you're painting, and I took a few other things, and then she was very interested and reacted, and then she sort of took it back again and explained to me. I had just described her late boyfriend, and some of the phrases, as I kept saying, for some reason I keep getting this chap, he's saying, it's okay, don't worry, it's going to be okay. So I was actually getting a message from him in spirit, just using the psychometry, and I've only ever had that one time using psychometry, but normally it's just you pick up on, you see things that people see, you see where they've been. There's one I told this chap, oh yeah, that was you can go in different directions. It was a jump ahead. I held something of his and said, well, I can just see car parts all over your driveway, lots and lots of car parks. And he said, no, that's never happened. And he got back in touch a couple of weeks later, and he said, he said, I had trouble with my car, and I had all these car parts all over the driveway. And I thought, that's what it was about. So again, seeing ahead. So it can be used in lots of different ways, not just to see the present or the past, but to contact and to see ahead, which I thought was quite interesting.
One parting message from Greg Morey saying, thank you, Jen, for being such a beautiful soul to share with us the importance of remembering who we really are.
It's nice. Thank you.
Thank you all for attending, and there are evidently a number of people who could not make this meeting but will see the video. They registered and asked if I could send them the recording, and I will send it to you too, Jenny.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for
That's all right. Thank you. That's been fun.
Thank you. Thank you. We're lovely.
Yes. Okay.
It's nice.
Thank you.
All right then.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.